If he did get in and he did say what he did do what he said he would do, then potentially he could affect quite a lot of change, you know. But it would create a lot of uncertainty in the short term, huge uncertainty.
Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics. On our show, we're recording on Monday afternoon, although this will be live Tuesday. So, in the midst of election day, finally here. In some ways, a good thing. I would say we'd be done hearing about the election, although it seems like no matter what happens on Tuesday, that the declaration of who the actual acceptance of who the actual winner is probably going to be drawn out. And obviously, this has been in the midst of what I think has been quite a historic rally in 2024. I'm not sure if there's another year besides 1980 or 2011 that this would stack behind, although we'll be digging into all of that and more with today's guest, a first-time guest on the show, although someone that many of the long-timers in the precious metals markets know quite well. It's Marco Burns of Terra Coins. And Mark, it's a pleasure to have you join me here. And how are you today?
I'm great, Chris. Yeah, thanks a lot for having me on, and thanks for all the work you've done over the years. I've enjoyed your show.
Well, I appreciate that. And I appreciate you digging into a lot of this market action that is happening. And why don't we start with the election? Monday was a little bit quiet in gold and silver, but any thoughts you have on whether it makes a difference to the gold and silver markets, depending on who wins or anything? And let's take it from there.
Um, I mean, I think it can make a difference in the short term, but I think we're always better to focus on the medium and long term when it comes to precious metals and particularly physical gold and silver bullion. So I don't think it'll make a whole lot of difference one way or the other, because the problems that we face, not just in the US but globally, in terms of this global fiat debt Ponzi system that we have, is so gigantuan and so enormous that it is an element of don't like to be the bearer of bad news. I am an optimist by nature, but there is an element of rearranging the chairs, the deck chairs into the Titanic, and to me it does not really matter whether, and it's been similar for many years, whether it be Republican or Democrat. It's almost a bit of a Punch and Judy show, and no matter what they say in these elections, when they get elected and they get into power, they frequently do the opposite of what they said they do. So Trump might be a little bit more true to his platform potentially, and to what he's saying he will do. And if he did get in, it's very difficult to see who's going to get in, but on balance, it looks like he is more likely to get in. But as you are suggesting or alluding to there, I think it's going to be contested almost certainly, and it's pretty shocking. I mean, I'm not easily shocked, but after what's happened in recent years, I'm not easily shocked. But the level of acrimony and division and just absolute aggression, it's not passive aggression, it's just outright vicious attacks, verbal attacks, and incitement to hatred. And it's shocking. It really is shocking, to see it in the land of the free and the home of the brave. The land that gave much of the world democracy. It makes me quite sad, because I would be very pro-American and pro the best aspects of America. Which is obviously the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. To me, unfortunately, until there is a power behind the throne, we know that, there is sort of a permanent government in many countries around the world, not just in the US. So whoever's in power, are they going to really address and tackle that? Trump says he will. Whether he will or not, I don't know, but he says he will. So it'll be interesting to see if he did get in and he did say what he did do what he said he would do, then potentially he could affect quite a lot of change. But it would create a lot of uncertainty in the short term, huge uncertainty, and it would create, as we were chatting before, and you alluded to, in terms of those free market policies, in terms of slashing taxes and all the rest, and cutting government spending. And that has to be done at some stage because it's out of control, the government spending, particularly military spending. Um, but all those cuts would result in almost certainly massive deflation and a deflationary, potentially a depression, but at the end of the day, I think we need that. We need a recession to clear out all the deadwood, and in effect have a proper reset, which is based on libertarian values of free markets and of free trade amongst people and nations. Because people are being, businesses, the productive members of society around the world are being suffocated with both the crazy taxes which have gone higher and higher, and all these stealth taxes, and now the shrinkflation, the inflation, and the debasement of currency that we're seeing. So it's very, very destructive. It's been seen throughout history. This is the way most empires end. So will Trump arrest that decline? He could potentially, but it would be quite a sharp reset that would have to take place. So that's a long way of me saying, unfortunately, Chris, I think there's going to be pain one way or the other. But as we know, no pain, no gain. We need some pain, actually, and to have a proper reset, not a reset for the benefit of certain corrupt elites and certain corrupt elite interests, but a reset for the benefit of the working class, the middle classes, and the entrepreneurial members of our society, the people who work hard and they create jobs and they create wealth. That's what the reset has to be about, and someone who has that vision. Trump has that vision to a degree. There's issues with Trump. He's far from perfect, and But at the end of the day, what scares me most is just a complete lack of respect for the truth, actually, and for allowing a healthy debate amongst people. And unfortunately, it comes down to the media because there's no balance there whatsoever, and we've lost the so-called fourth estate. They're meant to ask questions. They're meant to accurately portray what both sides are saying, and that hasn't happened at all for a long time. But it's actually gotten worse. I didn't think it'd get worse, but it's actually gotten worse, And that's been seen in media around the world now. We see it in the UK media. We see it in media here in Ireland, where I am. The media is becoming more and more partisan, and there's no balance there. And so it's quite dangerous. So. So in terms of precious metals, the bottom line for me is precious metals are going to go higher one way or the other. And again, as we all say in this space, it's not that they're going higher per se, it's that the dollar in particular, but also the euro and the British pound and all fiat currencies are going to lose a lot of value. They are losing value. That's what's happening right now as we speak. Gold and silver not going up per se. It's that the fiat currencies are losing value. And that is going to continue whether we see Trump in power or Kamala Harris in power, whether we see Republicans or Democrats. It will not make a whole lot of difference one way or the other. It could have a short-term impact, obviously, but medium and long-term, I wouldn't think it would have a whole lot of impact one way or the other.
Yeah, a lot of great points that you had in there. And I know what you mean, where certainly for most of the elections that I've lived through, maybe I didn't realize it exactly at the time, but it's usually been two different flavors of the same choice. Again, I don't know exactly what Trump is going to do if he's elected, although, like you mentioned, some of the things he's suggesting, it leaves me in a weird mindset where it's on one hand, the lower taxes, if he brings Elon Musk in to cut a lot of wasteful government spending from a free market perspective, yes, those are great things to the degree that we're past the point where you can do those without actually having the consequences come due. It's sinking in where I don't know that they're really ready to take those steps, although they're talking about it. Here's JD Vance, who has mentioned before that he's a big fan of a dollar devaluation. Now he's saying he's coming around to Ron Paul's view on the Federal Reserve. We have RFK in there talking about taking fluoride out of the water, busting up big pharma. So, like you said, we don't know exactly who's going to win or what they will be able to implement if they do come in. But I guess we'll get a little more clarity on that in the next couple of days and weeks. Although, Mark, shifting back to gold and silver, and I agree to your larger point that forces driving that, ultimately money creation, debt, we have a pretty good idea what's going to happen there. Although, A, would you say that what we've seen so far in 2024 puts this really in the number three ranking of whatever category you want to call it, of significant years in gold and silver? We had 1980, we had 2011. I don't remember a year seeing a rally quite of this significance. I've been thinking about it, and seems to be in the three slot for me. And second part to that also is, what do you think in particular has driven the metals, both of them, so much in this year, which was not a year where it was just unexpected easing from early on, but we saw anticipated cuts just finally coming through about a month and a half ago. So what would you say in terms of how it stacks up and why this year?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think you're probably right in terms of the comparisons with 1980, 2011. Um, in terms of the price move, in terms of um, yeah, it is acting as a safe haven again, as it did in that period 2008, 9, 10, 11, and as it did in the late 1970s. So there's parallels there. This time, I think we're more at the start of. I don't even like I used to use the term for a long time, as most people in the space, we talk about bull markets and bear markets. But really, bull markets and bear markets are really phenomena that we see in traded markets in terms of stock markets and bond markets, Whereas I think, it is money. And, obviously you can have a bear market in a fiat currency, but it's not really, they're not really bear markets and bull markets, because ultimately they're always losing value. And we've seen the dollar's lost 99% of its value since 1913. So yeah, parallels at 1980 to 2011, but I think we're sort of, yeah, it's 2024. I think it could be a bit of a light bulb moment. I think the masses are beginning to wake up. I was amazed for many, many years. I used to do daily market update nearly every single day, from 2004, early 2005 through to 2020. And I always thought there would be a light bulb moment whereby the masses would wake up, and we'd see that gold rush. And I used to always see the headlines, gold rush. And I knew there was no gold rush because I could see in my own business what demand was there, how many new account openings there were, what was happening in the business. And then I was speaking to other dealers in the US and in Germany and around the world. And they were telling me that, yeah, demand had picked up a bit, but it wasn't like suddenly the masses were all opening up bullion accounts and buying gold and silver. And that hasn't been seen. It was seen a little bit in 2011. There definitely was quite a significant increase in demand from the retail. But even then, I think it still remained probably less than 1% of the population, of the sort of retail investors who were buying fiscal bullion.
And Mark,
So
if I can just top in for a second, what do you think really drove 2011?
um, well, I suppose it was the debt crisis. It started with Lehman
But
Brothers. It
but in
started with the
terms
banking.
of specific demand in silver, we did have a significant jump in the ETFs and SLV. You mentioned there was some physical buying, but not overwhelming. I know there was also a situation with a bit of a short squeeze on the banking side, but I think that's something people never really hear that much about. And if you have any thoughts on what on the silver investment side really made that price move like it did.
In 2011. Well, there was quite a bit of physical demand, but it wasn't, as you said, it wasn't a huge increase to merit the jump in the silver price up to the $50 price that it went to. There was, I mean, I think there was a short squeeze, but they didn't lose control of the marketplace. They didn't lose control of the silver market. They didn't lose control of the silver futures market. So there was that hope that we were going to see a short squeeze and return to a free market. But I think ultimately, whether it be JP Morgan or whoever else is at the back end there, I think, who knows, they may even have pushed it higher. They may have done a little bit of a pump and dump to push prices higher and then, get it up to 50, create a bit of a speculative frenzy, and then short the hell out of it and push it back down lower again. And I think it's quite possible that that happened. Um, but there were fundamental factors driving it in terms of, obviously Lehman Brothers, the big banks under pressure being bailed out. Then there was a sovereign debt crisis. And so there was real concerns there. And then Bernanke came in, and they were talking about helicopter money and all the rest. And then they were talking about QE, and Mario Draghi is talking about QE. So people were realizing, wow, this quantitative easing is unprecedented. This is a monetary experiment. So it was leading to, well, it was leading to new people moving into the gold and silver bullion marketplace, but only quite a small fraction of the overall retail investment marketplace. Some were buying ETFs, but even the ETF demand wasn't huge. It tended to be even the smart money that were diversifying into bullion. So yeah, so it's interesting to see, will we have that broad mass market participation ever in the bullion marketplace? I used to think it was automatic that would happen, that we would see a gold rush, that everybody would be talking about it, and it would become genuinely like everybody, like people are queuing up in the streets. You see lines of people out in the streets of New York and London and every major city in the world. People are outside the coin dealers, and there's shortages. And who knows, that may well happen yet, but sometimes I wonder, because the propaganda against the metals is so strong, I sometimes wonder whether we will ever see that phenomenon. And also, I think Bitcoin and some of the cryptos have been positioned in order to siphon demand away from gold and silver. And I was quite positive on Bitcoin at the start because it had a lot of the qualities of gold and silver. But then I saw how certain sections of the financial media were almost positioning Bitcoin to the masses as an alternative to gold, which the same people who were quite anti-gold were now pro-Bitcoin. And I felt that's quite interesting, so I could see that it was actually, in mainstream media, big respected newspapers internationally in the financial space, and TV stations were basically saying, why buy gold and you can have digital gold, and so Annie, that's a long way of saying that obviously the amount of money that's gone into the Bitcoin and the crypto space is huge, and that has siphoned demand away, particularly from silver actually, but also to a degree from gold. So it makes me wonder whether we will ever see that sort of mass market mania gold rush that many of us have expected. And so I'm not sure, and I don't think people should hold their breath, because I think a lot of people are waiting for that moment. And then from a contrarian perspective, they might actually sell into that, But that may never happen. We have to be realistic about it. And it may happen. I'm not saying it won't happen, but I don't think you should be basing your exit strategy on that.
Yeah, I understand what you mean. And certainly we have not seen that rush come into silver, certainly on a retail level yet. I mean, there's the last couple of years, we've had some elevated years. Although, Mark, that's another thing I'd love to get your opinion on. We've heard reports of a lot of selling, I would say over a year now. Within the past month, I believe I've heard one dealer saying 5-to-1 sales to buy on a retail level. Anything you could comment on there based on what you're seeing?
Yeah, no, I'm hearing that. So my model is design, mint, and wholesale. And I'm gonna have to start going doing some retail soon, because the wholesale is slow. And the reason the wholesale is slow is exactly as you're alluding to there. The distributors, my retail distributors in Ireland and the UK and the US primarily, but in other countries as well, they are telling me that exactly as you said there, that there's a huge amount of selling of gold coins in recent weeks and months, and gold has hit record highs consecutively over a period of weeks there, record nominal highs. It's important to realize, but record highs nonetheless in the eyes of the public. They see it as record highs. And I think what's happened is there are a percentage of the gold buying population who may be over allocated to precious metals, and it's the one sort of liquid asset that they have. And there's people who have, there is a cost of living crisis, and people have dependents, they have children, they have different expenses. So I think some people have been taking profits on their gold bullion at these record highs, and therefore there has been quite a lot of selling into the marketplace of both gold bullion coins and gold bullion bars, the 1 ounce format, and that means that, yeah, my distributors are saying, listen, why would we buy from you when we have to buy from you at a few percent over spot, whereas we're buying from our retail clients at 1 or 2% below spot, you know? So they have quite big inventories now, you know, which is interesting. And that's been seen. I'm talking to dealers in the UK, in the US, and in Germany, you know. So it's unusual. Normally, when you would see record highs like that, you know, you see headlines around the world, and then more buying comes in. But I think what's happening is, like when I was doing a daily market update, I was looking at the Financial Times every single day. I would actually buy the hard copy paper nearly every single day. I'd be looking at the financial press and media in the UK and London. There's the Financial Times, there's the Telegraph, and I'd be watching Bloomberg, I'd be watching CNBC, I'd be looking at the Wall Street Journal, and I'd be getting an overall feel for what's going on. Back then in 2009, 10, 11, when gold price hit record highs, it was on the front page of the newspapers. Whereas recently they were very slow to cover it, you know. Even when gold hit record highs, they didn't cover it for a few days. And then when it is covered, frequently it's covered in sort of a negative way. So I think it's not in the consciousness really of the people. I think it's even less of the consciousness of the mainstream people now than it was in 2008, 9, 10, 11. Admittedly, back then we were in a global financial crisis and it was realized it's a global financial crisis. Whereas now, I don't think people realize we're in a crisis. It's more of a sort of a political crisis. It's a geopolitical crisis. You see that in just the obviously in the crisis we see in politics around the world. There's so much division, you know, between pro this and anti that, and people are divided along all sorts of religious lines, racial lines, biologies, men and women, sexuality, climate. It's just, I mean, I don't think there's been a period of. I studied history, but it's so divisive, you know. So we have a political crisis, but we don't have an economic crisis yet. I think you and me know there's an economic crisis sort of bubbling away underneath, and there's a monetary crisis happening as we speak, but that is not in the mainstream consciousness just yet. And until it is in the consciousness, we're not going to see that sort of that mainstream buying. But it is happening a small bit. I mean, the data from Costco is very interesting. And the Costco data shows that there is a younger demographic of people buying bullion, you know, for the first time. And there's women buying bullion for the first time. And obviously that's due to the cost of living crisis and the fact that younger people in their 20s and 30s, they know they cannot afford to buy a house. And they don't want to save in dollars in the bank because they're not getting any yield, and their savings have been eroded by inflation. So you cannot save for a house if inflation is running at 3, 5, 10%, whatever it is, you know. So maybe that's part of what's happening is that there are, I mean, Walmart are selling bullion, Costco are selling bullion. So, and then the big mints and the big refineries are also selling retail. So that's potentially what's happening with the smaller retail distributors is that they're getting buybacks. They're getting people selling back into them, and maybe they're not selling as much because they have more competition from the refineries, the mints, the Costco's, and the Walmart. So that could be an aspect as well that be interesting to see if you drill down into World Gold Council numbers in terms of the supply demand, whether you get that sort of breakdown of the numbers. That could be a factor that's just occurred to me now, you know, because Costco, they are selling quite reasonable volumes, you know. I don't know, interesting to know what the volumes with Walmart are as well, because Walmart are selling bullion as well, you know. So it's interesting times.
Have you seen any slowdown in the amount of selling? Has that changed at all in the past year or so?
I think it's definitely there's a slowdown selling, is my understanding, in the last 2 weeks, 4 weeks. You know, I think there was a burst of selling there when gold prices got up. You know, over obviously the record highs was 2000. I think some people were underwater for a period of time, and they're waiting for gold to get back above 2000 to sell. So I think that was the initial burst of selling by certain people who had gold bullion coins. So I think in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I think the selling has slowed down, but there's still a bit of inventory there that needs to clear before those retailers start buying from the wholesalers again, you know. But and there's also the phenomena of the likes of the Royal Mint. I think the US Mint as well. They have actually been minting massive volumes, you know. And this is what we see in the industry. It's a funny industry whereby it's so price driven. It's incredibly price driven, and when the prices go up, the mints and the refineries, they up their production in a massive, massive way. And then a glut of supply comes in. There's a slight delay before that comes into marketplace, and then the price peaks, then the price comes down, then there's a glut of inventory there. So it's a funny industry. I've been saying that why don't they work more on a royalty model, whereby they start selling based on actual demand rather than minting massive volumes and then sitting on massive inventories. Um, but it's one of the most competitive industries in the world. People don't realize just how competitive it is. Because the likes of the US Mint and the Royal Mint and the big government mints, they're now competing in a very big way, retail as well as they used to be more traditional wholesale. There used to be a clear demarcation between the wholesale and the retail. Whereas those guys looked at the retail margins and they said, well, we can have a piece of that as well. So yeah, it's interesting. And so one of the phenomena is I do think that some of the gold guys, they realize that silver is very, very cheap relative to gold. So I think some of that gold selling was also smart money who realized it's a good time to sell gold. It's gone up quite a lot. And obviously the gold silver ratio, silver is very, very cheap. So I think a percentage of those, not a huge percentage, but it could be a good 20%, 25%, something like that, roughly. I think we're potentially people who are selling gold to swap into silver. So yeah, it's interesting, very interesting.
Yeah, and in the midst of that, okay, we've had selling from the retail side, which I wonder if that has helped to fund the deficit that we're getting reported from Silver Institute for the last couple of years. Back in 2022, rather, we saw inventories on COMEX and LBMA decline. Then that stabilized. Actually, COMEX registered up a little bit over the past couple of months, but it's coming down for a while. Then that stopped. Then for the year following that, we saw declines in the ETFs. Now some of these things are getting reversed. It seems like the selling this year coming from retail. And I wonder what happens when that gets exhausted. Not saying we're at that point yet, but if we are going to run the deficit that Metals Focus and the Silver Institute suggest, if that did happen at the same time the retail selling did get exhausted, I'm just wondering how you see all of this playing out, because on top of it, as I know you're familiar with, we don't have a lot of capital going into the mining sector right now either. So it seems like the conditions are in place that you could eventually hit a gap somewhere in there at the same time where we have the industrial usage continues to be strong. Maybe we hit a recession. We hit a recession. Do the government start pumping out money for green projects? That's personally my vote. So all that said, what do you think about the possibility of hitting some sort of issue, and also how else could it be resolved?
When you say hitting some sort of issue, you mean in terms of the supply demand issue in the silver market?
Yeah, where if
Yeah.
if we are running the deficits as reported and we continue to run that long enough, then do we have an issue where there is a shortage of metal?
Yeah, well, yes, there should be in a normal marketplace where supply demand factors are the key, and they should be the key in markets. But as we've seen over the years, the silver market has not operated in that manner. So, and this remains the question. I mean, I expected a short squeeze, 2008, 9, 10, 11. Not because I was some genius or expert. It was more that I was following the guys who were. So, the likes of Ted Butler, rest in peace, and David Morgan, the silver guru, and the guys in Gata, and there's so many people. There's been books written about this, in terms of the manipulation of gold and silver using the futures market, and just even that when you look at the price data and how it goes down from the AM fix to the PM fix consistently, I mean, it's just flagrant, and this used to be conspiracy theory, like lots of things, and then the CFTC and the Department of Justice found JP Morgan guilty, and they were fined a small sort of slap on the wrist of a few million euro fine. It's probably a trading desk profits for a few hours, and then they find some kid who's a patsy, and he's the rogue trader, on the desk. So I think until that manipulation ends, we won't see a free market, a fair market in silver, And I think it will end. I do genuinely think that, but I genuinely thought that in 2009, 10, 11, 12, and I was wrong. But I do think this time it's quite different, because, the world has become much more divisive, and obviously there are, sovereign nations, whether it be China and Russia in particular, also India, also Iran. The US has, unfortunately, it has sort of burnt bridges with some of these big, powerful, emerging market nations. And obviously, we talk about the BRICS all the time, and these are, they have forged very interesting alliances. So only in recent days we heard chatter that the Russians, and sorry, I think it was more than chatter. I think it reported on Interfax, which is the Russian, one of the state media organizations in Russia, so that the Russians are going to start buying silver, So, and that's something that I expected a long time ago. Because we know the dollar is the Achilles heel of the U.S., the more corrupt elements in the U.S. Who are about empire, and so the dollar and the fiat nature of dollar is the Achilles heel, and all it would take is China, Russia, India, Iran, any of these nations, and obviously the Middle East is just a complete mess, and it's so unstable. And unfortunately, we haven't talked about that. Or Ukraine is a mess, and the whole world it hasn't been this unstable in a long, long time, So all it will take a few of these sovereign nations to start putting in a few hundred million dollars worth of demand for fiscal bullion, and I think very quickly those were not. I think it's there's no doubt those warehouses would be cleared out very quickly. So a force majeure will be declared, and I think that's only a matter of time. I do genuinely, and yeah, and plus there's the billionaires in the world. I mean, I used to have people telling me that what happened in 1979, 1980 would never happen again, because that was the Hunt brothers, and they said, look what happened to Hunt brothers. They tried to corner the market, and look what happened to them. And I said, well, that was very different, like, to today. Back then, there was only, probably a few hundred billionaires in the world, there was only, royal families, and there was a few, very wealthy banking elites and industrialists. But there was only a few hundred billionaires in the world back then, including the hunters. Whereas today, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of billionaires, and many of them are in China, many of them in Russia, and they don't care about American foreign policy. Some of these people, and so they're not subject to the SEC like the Hunt brothers were, So it's a very, very different phenomenon, and I think, and whether it be Indians or Middle Eastern, sheiks, these people have a lot of money, and they're getting worried, and I think they are diversifying into both gold and silver. And I think the silver story is it's funny. I mean, it's censored, it's not. I mean, it's not reported. I mean, gold is barely reported, and it's reported in negative and in a very biased and very selective way, where silver is even more. I mean, silver has been written out. It's lucky if it gets a sentence in a report, by Reuters or some of the even Bloomberg. It's almost taboo. Like, it's one of the few taboos in the world is silver, and it's amazing when you watch the media how they don't cover it in a positive way ever. When it's cheap, they don't say it's cheap, and when it goes up, they don't say it's gone up. It's always just, it's speculative, it's dodgy, it's industrial, it's volatile, they're always trying to put people off it, But at the end of the day, it comes back to what you're saying, Chris. Is it's supply and demand will dictate everything, and it will dictate the silver price as well. And the ratio in the Earth's crust, the ratio is geologically, it's 15 parts of silver to 1 part of gold. And I've no doubt in the next 5, 10 years, we will get back to that ratio. More likely, I think in the next 2, 3, 5 years, I think we'll get back to that ratio. And we were at that ratio. You mentioned 1980 and you mentioned 2011. They're 2 key years, and that's where the ratio went in those years. When we got close to sort of fair value for gold and silver, it's interesting. The gold silver ratio came back to 15 to 1. So, like gold at who knows, 15,000, you see silver 1,000. And that sounds, as I say that, it sounds like, clickbait. So I don't mean it as clickbait. I don't mean it as, but I do think 15,000 gold is quite realistic in a 5, 10 year time frame, if we think long term in this 5, 10 years, because the debt is going up it's $100,000 a second, I mean, people need to just stop and think about this. $100,000 a second, it's not a minute, it's not an hour, it's a second. So, in 60 seconds, you're going up $600,000, So, and, when I got into this business in 2003, we were talking about millions were big numbers, and then we went to billions were big numbers. And then we multiply that by another 1,000. So we go from 6 digits to 9 digits to 12 digits. Trillion is a big, big number, People have no idea how big a trillion is, And a trillion seconds, as many people in our industry try to explain it in terms of time, because I think it's only when you explain it in terms of time that people understand it. So the trillion seconds is nearly 30 or over 31,000 years, So it's like 29,000 BC, So this is, and now they used to have to go and create the paper dollars and the paper euros and have the ink and print it. Now they just go on the keyboards. And, I like the whole thing of control, like Ben Bernanke, or what's the lady in the Treasury who had the sign fall off there last week? Janet Yellen.
Janet.
Did you see that sign? Did you see that sign falling off?
I sure did. It's falling off under the weight of the debt. And I can oblige both of those fetishes you have there, Mark. In fact, I could give you a little Bernanke and we'll get some Janet in here too.
Show me some of them. Yeah. So that was pure synchronicity. Like that was a sign from God. Whether you believe in God or you believe in the power of the universe, to me, it's the same thing. And,
we have some big Janet Yellen fans in our audience. I won't call them out in their full first and last names right now, but I mean, we have some fan members there.
Well, I'm surprised at that because she's just a bureaucrat, and unfortunately, I think she's a somewhat corrupt bureaucrat, So, but I don't like getting into personal things and name calling, But she hasn't. When the history of these times are written, neither Ben Bernanke or Janet Yellen will come out looking very favorably. I think their policies will be frowned upon in quite a big way, and they will be seen as quite corrupt and not looking after the interests of the American people and of the American nation. They will be seen as looking after the interests of Wall Street, in effect. So, and giant corporations, giant banks over the interests of the people. So, but what was the point I was making there? In terms of, if they just go on a keyboard, Janet Yellen or Ben Bernanke or whoever the Powell, or the bureaucrats in the Treasury, and they control. I don't know how they do it, but I like the thing that they go on their computer and they go Control Alt P 1000000000000. Is that 12 zeros? So that's 1 trillion. Boom, and that goes into the marketplace, and they buy the bonds. And I mean, it's a Ponzi. It's a classic Ponzi. There's never been a more clear Ponzi in the history of mankind, and it's the scale of the Ponzi, which is just absolutely huge, And they've gotten away with it. And I thought this Ponzi would end in 2011, 2012, and I was clearly saying that, and I was proven wrong. The central bankers proved themselves to be much more powerful than I ever thought they could be. But you remember the expression we used to use? We said they kicked the can down the road, and that's what they did. But we're at the end of the road now. It was a longer road than any of us thought it would be. But we're at the end of that road now, and I genuinely think that we are in the final furlong of this monetary experiment. And at any moment, the Chinese, the Russians, the BRICS, they can pull. No, sorry, not at any moment. That's a bit dramatic, but. Over a period of weeks or months, they could pull the plug on this fiat dollar Ponzi. which does not, people think when I say that, oh, I'm anti-American, I'm pro-China, about Russia. Far from it. I'm absolutely pro-American, but I worry that strategically, this creates a risk to us all. In effect, it creates a risk to the entire Western world, and we're moving to a multipolar world, one way or the other. But we do need to get our monetary houses, our fiscal houses in order, because they are large creditor nations and we are large debtor nations. And we cannot be a debtor nation and hope to be successful economically and to provide for our people, for our children and children's children. And that's what we need to be having a conversation about. What is in our interests in the long term? Because everything seems to be done for short term, quarterly profits, almost quarterly benefits. There's no strategic long term vision being put forward by either of the candidates. Trump a little bit more than Harris, obviously. So anyway, I'm getting political there. I don't like getting political, but it does worry me, because the lack of the lack of any sort of real political debate or economic debate is quite frightening, and even the whole election, they're not even talking about basic economics, it's all point scoring and name calling, and it's like kindergarten stuff. I mean, you wouldn't expect, if you saw 10-year-old kids in the school arguing like that, you'd be disappointed. But to see the leaders of the free world doing this, it's just shocking. It really is, and it doesn't bode well. But anyway, that's my little rant over.
Yeah, well, how fortunate that we have Janet hard at work on that. And actually, Mark, you said that no one is talking about that. Actually, that's not true. Even Janet has mentioned that the debt load is reasonable that it remains at this level, although, of course, there's virtually no chance of that happening. And as I might add, we come up under 2 months now until the next debt ceiling debate. Are you able to see that there,
I
Mark?
am, yeah, and that's
Okay.
classic PR right there. I can read between the lines to see what she's doing there. So that's her way of saying she knows the debt crisis is coming. So she's trying to basically get ahead of the curve and say, when it does happen, she'll say, "Well, I did warn, but it's like
She
it's not.
didn't.
It's yeah, she didn't until the last minute. The Titanic is going down. She's telling people it's too late, and she's put a hole in the Titanic. Her policies. Meanwhile, she's trying to blame the Russians or whatever bogeyman du jour it is. So yeah. It's crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. But it is what's driving it. I mean, we used to use the term perfect storm, and I do think we're on the verge of that perfect storm. Because the system itself is very, very vulnerable. Macroeconomically, monetarily, and geopolitically. And there are three big sort of fundamentals that you need to really analyze. And when you look at those three through the prism of the macroeconomics, particularly monetary economics and the money, and then the geopolitics, it's not pretty, and it bodes well for what we do. Unfortunately, it doesn't bode well for the world, but maybe it does bode well for the world in the medium and long term, because it's like a giant disgusting boil that we need to lance, and just lance the boil and get on with it, and then create the new. So it's going to be a bit of a rocky few months, a rocky year, 2 years, no doubt. But we will come through it. I've no doubt about it. People who own precious metals will come through it better than most.
Well, we'll get the first stage of it this week. Of course, we have a Fed meeting on Thursday too. So we'll see how it all progresses through there. And Mark, I appreciate you coming by, making some time to talk about the metals and the things that are going on. And perhaps just in wrapping up, you can let folks know where they can find you.
Yeah, it's taracoins.com is the website. And yeah, you can buy the coins from Monetary Metals Exchange, from APMEX, from Bullion by Post in the UK, and then from the distributors in Ireland. And if you have any bullion dealers, I'm looking for distributors in the US in particular, because that's where people are. So the coins are resonating most with people in America. There's something like 33 million people in the US who are Irish Americans. But it's interesting. There's people who have no connection with Ireland whatsoever, and they just really like them. They have a feel of a sort of a sovereign coin, even though they're not legal tender. They're bullion rounds, so they are 99.99% pure gold and silver. And yeah, they basically they I suppose they tell the story of Ireland, and they tell the story of the Tree of Life. And the Tree of Life is probably one of the most sacred symbols in the world, and it's in all the religious and all the spiritual traditions. So there's a lot of energy, and there's good energy and good spirit in those coins, and I think yeah, people own them, and they're wowed by them actually. But a lot of people say they are the most beautiful non-legal tender coins or rounds in the marketplace. So get a few for Christmas. Yeah, as I was saying to you beforehand, Chris, I think they make beautiful, really beautiful gifts, you know. And why do people buy jewelry? Crazy markups. People have no idea how much they're being ripped off by jewelry, and plus there's sales tax in many countries, whereas these there's no sales tax, and they're just beautiful gifts to give to people, you know. And give them to women of life. The women love the Tree of Life in particular, you know. So a beautiful gift to give your partner, your wife, your children, birthdays, Christmas, whatever it is, you know. So that's it. Yeah. So thanks for having me on, Chris, and yeah, look forward to talking to you again in the coming weeks and months.
Well, I appreciate that, Mark. Again, people can find him at Terra Coins. And yes, they are some beautiful coins and just in time for the holiday season. So, Mark, thanks for making some time. We'll have to catch up again soon. And you take good care of yourself, my friend.
You too, Chris. Take care. All the best.